Check, check. Let's go with that. So... let me see. Do. Okay, I think we're good to start. Episode 4. The Adventure of the Clouded Kokoro.
I begin to think, Wilson, said Sholmes, turning his head languidly in my direction, that there is more to this case than that which we have observed. Indeed, that there may be another part to the story that we are yet to discover. His eyes wandered, following the steam rising from his cup of herbal tea, leading him to the distant memory of that snowy evening. To the young lady collapsed on the pavement along Briar Road, and to the knife in her back. Lit in the soft glow of gas lamps, a most extraordinary scene had been set. And under the cover of a light fog, the curtain had risen silently on the insoluble mystery of our invisible killer.
Did you sleep last night, Mr. Naruhodo? No, not at all. It was an enormous hotel, wasn't it? The rooms were so luxurious, I felt like we were staying in a palace. And with all the gas lights twinkling, it was brighter than day, even in the middle of the night. What about the enormous beds? After my time on the SS Burya, I wasn't going to waste a single inch of that space. I spent the entire night rolling from one side of the mattress to the other. Oh yes, it really was the sort of night you can only dream of normally, except... when I learned that we owed £3 for the rooms, that dream quickly turned into a nightmare. Oops, sorry about that. The building was so impressive and the entrance so inviting, I just wandered in without thinking. In a lodging house in Japan, that sum of money would put a roof over your head for a whole year. I did try, but I'm afraid I couldn't help my tears when we were presented with the bill. I really am sorry. Well, never mind, we must find some more affordable lodging straight away, though. If not careful, our entire stipend will be used up in 10 days or less. London is a scary place. Good morning to you at this early hour. Oh yes, well. Good morning to you, Lord Chief Justice. We have come to report on the outcome of the trial at the Old Bailey yesterday. Susato-san is amazing. She doesn't bat an eyelid even in the presence of the imposing Lord Strongheart. Yes, I believe you had a very comprehensive initiation into British courtroom practices. Oh yes, it was very eye-opening. Thank you. And in accordance with your instructions, Lord Strongheart, Mr. Naruhodo performed his duty to the end. Yes, I've already been appraised of events. You conducted a remarkable defense. You may consider the test passed. Oh. No longer are you a student from the Empire of Japan. You may henceforth claim to be a fully fledged lawyer. My country is delighted to welcome young talent from such a remote eastern land. Thank you very much. So I'm a lawyer now. Now, in view of your new appointment, I have a fresh case in mind for you. I'd like you to take it on at once. I trust that won't be a problem. Another case already? Nothing trains a lawyer better than practical experience. I'm sure I don't sense dissatisfaction, do I? It's just that yesterday's trial ended unusually. I haven't quite come to terms with it. What's to come to terms with? The man was cleared. What more were you hoping for? The truth, I guess. The culpability of the defendant has not at the present time been established by this court. Consequently, the jury will not be required to proffer judgment. Well, Lord Van Zieks, it's been a pleasure, so it has. And as for you, my dear fella, I couldn't have asked for a better defense. Wahahaha. Just can't help wondering if Mr. McGilded really was innocent. Mr. Naruhodo, it's just that I never managed to ascertain the truth, and then the trial ended. Well, you needn't let it trouble you for a second longer. Sorry? What do you mean, Lord Strongheart? Magnus McGilded passed away, immediately following the trial. No, what? Mr. McGilded is dead? I have 19 minutes, 41 seconds until my next engagement. Time enough to talk. So let's get the details on McGilded's death. I don't understand what happened. How can he be dead? After the trial concluded yesterday, there was a great commotion in the Old Bailey. As you'll presumably recall, an omnibus had been wheeled into the courtroom. Yes, of course, that was the scene of the crime which Mr. McGilded had been accused of? Precisely. Well, while the bailiff's attention was diverted by some other matter, the omnibus went up in flames. No. How could such a thing have happened? That is being investigated as we speak, but already the police have identified a corpse found inside the charred shell of the carriage as that of McGilded. That's awful. The man must have slipped inside whilst the bailiff's attention was elsewhere. That bailiff really needs to pay more attention. And how could that have happened? That is also being investigated as we speak. Thinking back now, immediately after the trial, Mr. McGilded did mention going back into the courtroom to look at the omnibus. Well, I must be making tracks now. It's time for the inspection. Sorry, what inspection? They're going to examine the omnibus again, so I'm told. I asked if I could be present for it myself. An inspection of the omnibus? Not to my knowledge. I don't believe Scotland Yard had any intention of re-examining the carriage. But then who was Mr. McGilded talking about? Never mind that now. The Yard is making a thorough investigation. This matter is no longer any concern of yours. Leave it to the police. Poor Mr. McGilded. Was it, though? He seemed kinda sus. So, how did you find your first taste of our country's Supreme Court? Oh, well, I don't know. I mean, it was wow. Mr. Naruhodo means that the whole experience was steeped in the solemnity of Great Britain's long history. It's really a world apart from our own judicial system in Japan, which is only a few short decades old. Wow, Susato-san has such a way with words. And you seem to have a way of failing to find the right ones. The judicial system here is the most advanced in the world. Learn all you can. The most advanced in the world, is it? It was fortunate that your very first trial was a simple affair. Simple? That was simple? As I believe I mentioned yesterday morning, it was a trial you couldn't lose. I don't mean to be contrary, Lord Strongheart, but the case was anything but simple. The circumstances of the case were so incriminating I was stunned when I first heard them. In fact, I'm still finding it hard to believe that we managed to get a favorable verdict. Hehehehe. Is something funny? No, my apologies. However, the fact is that you did receive the not guilty verdict you set out to achieve. That can only be attributed to exceptional talent, wouldn't you agree? Or exceptional capital. Well, I don't know about that. Well, never mind. You exceeded my expectations, I freely admit. That much is at least an undeniable truth, which is precisely why I've prepared the new case for you that I mentioned before. What's going on? What was he going to say before? New case. Could you perhaps give us some more details about the new case you mentioned? Don't tell me it's a murder and the trial starts in 10 minutes. Don't worry, it's nothing so alarming or quite so urgent as your last assignment. In fact, this case is completely different. Oh, I see. Did he just read my mind? That is to say, no one has died as yet. And the trial will not be today. There's plenty of time to research the case thoroughly. 23 hours, 43 minutes, and 19 seconds to be precise. So the trial's tomorrow then. Is everything alright? Oh yes, I'm just a little confused, that's all. Yesterday's trial was... well, it's left me wondering if I'm really cut out for being a lawyer. Oh, Mr. Naruhodo! I don't know if I could face standing in that courtroom again after Mr. McGilded's trial. Yes, I nearly forgot there is one similarity with yesterday's case. Once again, there is currently no one to advocate for the defense. Oh, if the situation remains unchanged, the trial will start tomorrow with the defendant unrepresented. And if that happens, I need not remind you of the inevitable outcome. The most terrible end awaits the defendant. Yes, that's right. It kind of seems like they're just withholding representation from all these defendants to, like, guilt trip us into taking these cases. Here we go again. Your time is up. You will have to excuse me. I would advise you to begin making preparations for tomorrow's trial. After all, the clock is ever ticking. But he hasn't told us anything. There's now but 23 hours, 26 minutes, and 39 seconds until the court sits. Last time you mentioned the 23 hours, he said there was plenty of time. And one more thing, Mr. Naruhodo. There is something I should like to ask you. Oh, what's that? Yesterday you remarked upon something. That you intend to see through the will of your late compatriot, Mr. Asugi. I would be interested to hear what exactly you mean by that. Inside 34 seconds. Oh well, Kazuma always used to say, you see, that he wanted to learn how the greatest justice system in the world worked so he could change ours in Japan. And now that he's gone, I'd like to work towards that myself. And there's another thing. Oh? Another thing? Continue. On the way here on the steamship, he said something to me. There's something very important that I have to do. And what exactly would that be? He never had a chance to tell me. I suppose he would have done if he'd ever made it something. You're out of time. Well, thank you for an enlightening discussion. Mr. Naruhodo, what's all that about? Mr. Asagi never once mentioned anything of the sort to me. I urge you both to focus your attentions on the matter at hand. I've taken the liberty of summoning the police inspector in charge of the case. He'll be able to appraise you of the details. How long has he been there? So, I wish you the best of luck and bid you farewell. There's something very important that I have to do. Kazuma-sama, what did you mean? I wish I knew, but honestly, he never told me. Anyway, we'd better talk to that detective, don't you think? Yes, you're right. I hope I'm just imagining it, but I wouldn't say he looks pleased to see us at all. Is he holding some fries? Or I guess they would call those chips. Is that like a baguette and fries? That's a combo. Is that a thing in the UK? Or anywhere? That just kind of seems like carbs on top of carbs. Could we trouble you? What do you think? Arg. Lovely weather, isn't it? What's the weather got to do with anything? Listen to me, you young Japanese upstart. Some frippery about the weather doesn't get every English gent eaten out of your hand, you know? But Susato-san told me it was foolproof. I'm a busy man, a very busy man. There's a crime scene to investigate, but I'm here having to give the likes of you a talking to. Oh, I'm ever so sorry. Can you imagine what the other officers there will be saying? Haven't seen Gregson anywhere, have you? No, he's too busy with the bigwigs these days. And all because of some bumpkin who's here on a jaunt from a country I've never heard of. Hey, that's mean. You're being very mean, sir. Also, you're crushing your food that I assume you paid good money for. Hear that ripping sound? That's my reputation at the yard going to tatters. Are the police like part of Scotland Yard? I thought they were like two separate things. There's no need to rip us apart as well. I don't believe we've been introduced. This is Mr. Ryunosuke Naruhodo, a defense lawyer. Eh? It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. I'm Mr. Naruhodo's judicial assistant, Sue. Eh? It's lovely weather we're having today, isn't it? It is unseasonably fine, I grant you. London winters don't see a lot of sunshine. Unbelievable. How did she pull that off? So, Lord Strongheart has asked me to fill you in on the case. The name's Tobias Gregson. Inspector Gregson to you. I'm from Scotland Yard. Gregson? Inspector Gregson? What's the matter with Susato-san? Does this detective's name mean something to her? Inspector, are you perhaps the Inspector Gregson? You're acting like you know this man, Susato, but he's a London detective. Oh, I do know him very well, in fact. Very well? Yes, he features prominently in the adventures of Sherlock Sholmes. Oh, in that publication. What's it called again? Ranced Magazine? That's right, Inspector Gregson and Mr. Sholmes enjoy a wonderful friendly rivalry. Really? You rival the great Mr. Sholmes? That's incredible. Oh, well, I don't know about that. Mr. Sholmes isn't a professional like myself, of course, but he does come up with the goods from time to time. Mr. Sholmes is equally complimentary about you, Inspector, isn't he? You've earned his highest praise. Gregson is the pick of a bad lot of all the Scotland Yarders. Those were his own words. That's his highest praise? Well, Mr. Sholmes isn't particularly known for giving compliments, you see. That he is not, and thanks to that magazine, my name's known all over London town now. That's great, isn't it? I have to admit that, to start with, I was a little flattered by all the attention. Everyone wanted to shake my hand, and my reputation at the yard went through the roof. Well, that's wonderful. No, it's not. There's nothing more sinister than the man on the street. People are always looking at me now. They're whispering rumors about me under their breath, I'm sure. Dude, I think you just got anxiety. Rumors? Are you quite sure? He's changed since he started appearing in those stories. The fame's gone to his head, stuff like that. Gosh, do you really think people are saying such mean-spirited things about you? I mean, if he's a celebrity, probably, but also, he might just have anxiety. Like I said, they whisper, so I can't catch exactly what they're saying, but I know what folk are like. I'm sure that's what they're saying, as sure as eggs is eggs. I get the feeling this detective could be very hard work. Oh dear, perhaps a sudden rise to fame does change people. So, about the case that the Lord Chief Justice mentioned before. Nothing to tell, really. As far as we're concerned at the yard, it couldn't be simpler. Oh dear, that probably means that as far as we're concerned as lawyers, it couldn't be more complicated. I wish you were wrong about that, but I have a nasty feeling you're right. A young woman was walking along the pavement on Briar Road when she was stabbed from behind. Fortunately, it wasn't fatal, but she's still laid up in hospital unconscious. That's despicable. What sort of coward would attack a poor woman from behind? I suppose you would have finished whoever it was off with a Susato takedown, would you? That is neither here nor there, Mr. Naruhodo. Brace yourself, Ryunosuke. You've angered her now. Anyway, after something of a whirlwind investigation, the criminal was arrested. We barely had time for a cup of tea after the incident took place, to be honest. So there must have been something left at the scene that led you directly to the culprit? Or perhaps a reliable witness who recognized the person in question? Let me stop you right there. You're wasting your time on this one. Sorry? There's nothing you can do. There's no way to help the bloke now. Why ever not? Simple. Prosecutor that's been assigned to the trial tomorrow is Lord Barrick Van Zeeks. No! Sounds like you've heard of him then. Oh yes, we are very familiar with Lord Van Zeeks. Believed to be the harbinger of death itself. The Reaper of the Bailey. Reaper of the Bailey. Lord Barrick Van Zeeks, who faced in court only yesterday. Mr. McGilded told us all about him before the trial, didn't he? When Van Zeeks stands for the prosecution, they called the accused his sacrificial lambs. And in every single trial in which he's been the prosecutor, the accused has been damned. This Reaper of the Bailey nickname, I suppose he's earned that because every defendant he advocates is found guilty, is that correct? Well, if that's the case, we should inform you, Inspector, that in yesterday's trial against Lord Van Zeeks, Mr. Naruhodo secured a verdict of not guilty. Ha, and what of it? Oh, well, I think that means even against the Reaper of the Bailey, it's not impossible to save the defendant. No, you really don't have a clue, do you? What do you mean? What happened to that bloke in the end, eh? He's dead. Ah, Magnus McGilded came a cropper in that omnibus when it went up in flames. So you can't rightly say you saved the defendant, can you? What are you saying? Look, if Van Zeeks could get the dirt to stick on everyone, he'd be a miracle worker. That's not how it goes. He doesn't work miracles, he works magic, black magic. I'd have a good long think about that if I were you. Are we really supposed to believe that? Right, well, I filled you in as requested and I'm very nearly out of chips. So we'll be heading back to the crime scene now. We're still carrying out a few investigations there. It was Briar Road, you said, didn't you? Where the incident took place? That's correct, ma'am. If you head over to the holding cells, you can meet the criminal himself. You've branded him a criminal already. He's as good as shaken like a leaf in his cell. In his cell, he is. We'll give you a chuckle if nothing else. He's inmate 53. Speak to the jailer and he'll show you the way. Inmate 53. Thank you. There's no helping anyone against the Reaper of the Bailey, they say. Is something troubling you, Mr. Naruhodo? To tell the truth, when I recall the trial yesterday, I can't stop myself from shaking. The idea of facing the Reaper at court again is... Well, if you think it's too much for you, there's no shame in turning the case down. That takes courage, too. But if the man they've arrested is innocent, you could well imagine he would be shaking like a leaf in his cell. And I, for one, wouldn't find the sight of that funny. So, if I'm honest, I'm still reeling from the shock of yesterday's events myself, and I'm really not sure I'll be able to help this man, whoever he is. But I'd like to try. So I think I'm going to make some inquiries. Will you help? Did you really think you had to ask? After all, I am your judicial assistant. Thank you. So then, shall we? Yes, let's go. So we could go to Briar Road or the prison. I think we should go to Briar Road first. Because if we find stuff at the crime scene, we can ask the defendant about it. So this is where it happened, Briar Road. Ah, look, Mr. Naruhodo. Look at that regulation metal helmet. It's unmistakable. The men of Scotland Yard are here. They're investigating as we speak. That is their job, you know. But Mr. Naruhodo, to see one with my own eyes. They're often depicted in the adventures of Herlock Sholmes, but I never dreamt I'd ever come this close. To a real Bobby's helmet. What? The helmet? Hee, of course. I have to try one on one day. Well, I hope your hatty dreams come true. I don't see Inspector Gregson anywhere. Shall we see if we can sneak past and investigate the scene of the stabbing? Why should we sneak? I don't want to upset one of those bobbies and be butted on the head by one of those metal helmets. My skull would crack in two, I'm sure. Oh no, an English bobby would never do such a thing. This is a land of gentlemen, you know. I bet they would. They are still cops. And cops suck. What a delightful snowman. I didn't realize the English had a tradition of making snowmen as well. It looks a little creepy though. Oh, it has a scarf, look. You'd need one if you were out in this freezing cold all the time. I wish I had one. I'm afraid our budget is somewhat frozen at the moment too. We certainly can't afford a scarf. Surely the snowman here wouldn't miss his. But the person who made the snowman shirt certainly would. Yes, I know you're right. Anyway, even if I borrowed it, it wouldn't do much to warm my neck, would it? It's covered in snow. I mean, snow melts. This patch of pavement must be where the incident occurred. Yes, it's a very wide open space, isn't it? That's true. I can't see anywhere an attacker could have been hiding. Oi, what are you foreigners doing here? Ah. Oh, we, just investigating the scene, officer. Conspiring with that mustached fella from Japan, are you? Conspiring? Come here to destroy evidence, have ya? Get out of here before I give you a hiding. Go on. You shoot us away like rats. Wish we should give him a wide berth, I think. What a disappointing experience. That's one of the officers from Scotland Yard. The police are making sure the crime scene is undisturbed. I have a feeling if we wander too close, we'll be clapped in irons. I think perhaps you're being a little overcautious. We've done nothing wrong, so we have no cause for concern. Oh no, I'm not getting caught out again. Twice is enough. Twice I have found myself in handcuffs despite not knowing a thing about what was going on. Yes, you've had some dreadful experiences. I'm sure it's that wide-eyed look of panic you're so prone to. It does you no favors at all. Ugh. Oh, that's a Scotland Yard carriage. They use vehicles like that to rush to the crime scene and cart away criminals. You're very well informed, aren't you? It's long been a dream of mine to ride one of those through the streets of London. I'll just pick up a stone and throw it through one of the windows, then. That would mean being arrested in order to ride it, wouldn't it? Still, if it's the only way, help me find a good stone. No, 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 I wasn't serious. Anything else here? I don't know, maybe there just isn't that much we can do. There are piles of snow on the pavement here and there, but the road itself is covered in carriage tracks. It seems carriages often travel down Briar Road. It soon disperses all the snow. I slipped over when I was walking down the pavement earlier. Seems like it would be far safer to walk on the road instead. But you're rather small, Mr. Naruhodo, and dressed in all black. I worried coachman might not see you and you could be flattened by horses. Well, thank you for the rather small concern. What's this dented bicycle? Oh, a British bicycle, look. Although the wheel is so misshapen, I'm sure it couldn't possibly be ridden anymore. Someone must have been doing some breakneck cycling. It seems bicycles have become extremely popular in London recently. There's even a movement to change women's dress to allow them to ride as well. The bicycle fad won't last. I don't see why anyone would want to ride something like that. Goodness, do you dislike bicycles? No, not at all. I mean, it's not like that I dislike them exactly. It's just that any occupation that involves taking both your feet off firm ground seems reckless. If you'd ever tried walking on stilts and fallen into a river, I know you'd agree with me. I'll have to hire a bicycle sometimes. You can sit behind me while I ride you around. Oh, look at the windows of that building there. Are you sure they're windows? Yes, but they're all filled in with bricks. Oh, you're right. I wonder why. That is weird. Perhaps it's an empty property where nobody lives at the moment. There's smoke coming from the chimneys, though. Oh dear, everything still feels very foreign. There's so much we have to learn about this place. Anything else here? Can we, like, knock on the front door? That's a rather typical old brick building, isn't it? I'm sure it has a long and interesting history. Well, time certainly seems to have taken its toll on the place. It's crooked and it's sagging all over. In fact, it looks in decidedly worse shape than the other houses around here. We must find some cheap lodging ourselves as soon as possible. Yes, you're right. Cheap, but ideally with reasonably level floors. Okay. So I guess there really was nothing to see just yet here. So let's go to the prison. So these are British prison cells? Oh, they're ghastly. It feels just like a dungeon. Yes, and having experienced it in Japan myself, I can assure you that our wooden cells feel a lot cozier than these cold stone walls. Oh, don't, Mr. Naruhodo, you're making it seem worse. Apparently our client is in this cell here. But it's so dark at the back there, I can't make him out. I wonder what he's like. Inmate 53, your legal representative is here to see you. Stop hiding at the back of the cell and show your face at once. Am I a cat, as yet with no name? Calling me by a number. It's utterly, unbelievably, unjustly, unreasonable. I refuse to answer. Mr. Naruhodo, what? What do you think is going on here? I have no idea, but I wasn't just hearing things, was I? That tirade of complaints was in Japanese. Excuse me, but who? Shh, quiet. They're all around, hiding. I know they are. They're watching, listening, even now. I can sense it. Right. So could I ask you who exactly? There you are. You've come to curse me, haven't you? Don't try to hide it. You're a ghost. A ghost? I'm with you, Susato. This guy is a little off kilter. We mean you no harm, prisoner-san. Are you Japanese by any chance? This is... Sorry, I was checking something and I missed the thing. Forgive me for that outburst before, I'm so sorry. Oh, it's fine, we were just a little surprised, that's all. Imagine it! It's been 12 long months since I left my hometown, and here I am in a frightful fix in a foreign land. So hearing the sweet sentimental tones of a compatriot's voice here in this damp, dark hellhole was a most monumentally moving moment. Who could have guessed that this new client Lord Strongheart assigned to us would turn out to be a fellow Japanese? Ah, what compassion my fellow countrymen show, to dispatch a first-class lawyer all the way from Japan to defend a mere foreign student. Noble, nurturing, never-failing Nippon! A first-class lawyer? Oh dear, I think there's been something of a misunderstanding here. I wonder, would you be so kind as to tell us what's happened? Why you've been detained as a suspect, for example. Yes, I can, I will. Shan't say sullen and silent. Or was that stay sullen and silent? I'm not quite sure I understand what he means, but he seems happy. Yes, he does. I just hope he actually has a good reason to be. Thank you for cooperation. For your cooperation. I am a lawyer, as you said. My name is Ryunosuke Naruhodo. And I am Naruhodo-san's judicial assistant, Susato Mikitola. I am a visiting student sent here by our government. Notably, notoriously named Natsume. Soseki Natsume. Soseki Natsume. Soseki Natsume-san. What an unusual name. Call me Soseki, please. I'm a poet, you see, a writer of haiku. It's something of a nom de plume. A nom de plume, you mean an alias? That's right, Naruhodo-san. No, don't be so prosaic. It's much more refined than that. And haiku, that really reminds me of home. Did I hear you say that you were a visiting student sent over here by the government? Yes, that's right. A year ago, I was told to go and study English. First, I had to suffer that misery, and now this, it's beyond the pale. Suffer that misery? Did you not want to study here? No, I mean, I've had an interest in Great Britain for some years, of course. Oh. But just because the government tells you to do something, does it mean you can do it? No. What do you mean? If they told me to study English literature, that I could have understood. That's my field. But no, they told me to study the English language. Utterly, unbelievably, unjustly, unreasonable. I see. Only the other day, I was told to send a report about my first year here. I tendered a blank piece of paper. Wise words on white washi. You must be a man of great standing. Oh yes, so I'm often told. And often like to be told, it seems. The accusation against you. Could you perhaps tell us exactly why you've been arrested, Soseki-san? I didn't do it. I didn't commit that atrocious murder. Murder? Oh, no, no. It's alright, the woman didn't actually die, did she? But she was stabbed with a knife right before my eyes. Before your eyes? You mean you saw the attacker? Sorry, this is like accidentally opening things because the controller's in my lap. I didn't see anyone. What? If I had seen the person who did it, do you think I'd be locked up in here? Oh dear, it seems this case is becoming rather complicated. Why me? Why me? Why did that silly woman have to be stabbed in front of me? It's the curse of London. It's incredibly, inexcusably, irritatingly inconvenient. So Soseki-san was there at the scene, but he didn't see the attacker. It's vital that we find out more about the case. It was an accursed evening just after the snow had started to clear and heavy with fog. I'd been to the bookshop to buy some books and I was on my way back to my accursed lodgings. Sure, the bookshop wasn't accursed too? As I was walking along that accursed pavement, I could make out the sole silhouette of another ahead of me. A woman wearing a green overcoat she was, and just as I went to overtake her, she suddenly let out a little scream and collapsed onto the cold, hard slabs of stone at my feet. How terrible. I called out to the woman, but she didn't move. It was like a ghostly, ghoulish, grim graveyard. Slight exaggeration, perhaps. I was terrified. I had to get away from there. So I ran as fast as my legs would carry me back to my accursed lodgings. That's not good. They'll say it was shameful, I know, to run away like that. Tell me, Soseki-san, is the victim an acquaintance of yours? Don't be ridiculous. Do you think I know any of these fair-haired English, and a young woman at that? I'm diffident, shy, timid, unsure. I can't talk to people. I see. A young woman unknown to Soseki-san. At the time it happened, who else did you see nearby? Did anybody pass you? Regrettably, apart from myself and the woman, I didn't see a soul. No one? Oh, great. So the victim was unknown to you and there was nobody else on the street at the time. That creates something of a conundrum, doesn't it? What conundrum? What do you mean, Susato-san? What's the conundrum? Well, if what Soseki-san has just told us is true, there's something I can't explain. He says that he didn't know the victim if there was no one else at the scene, and he apparently fled without having been seen. I did! But if that's the case, surely this man has to be the culprit. Ah, you! What did you just say? Nothing, I didn't say anything. Oops, perhaps I thought that a little loudly. Actually, that's not what was troubling me. What I was thinking was, how did Soseki-san actually come to be arrested? Sorry? You didn't touch the victim and there was nobody at the scene to see him. So how did the police ever discover that he was there in the first place? Oh yeah, she's right. It was him, that accursed great detective. He led the police to me, of all the bad luck. Accursed great detective? Could it be? I shall never forget that man's name as long as I live. With his haughty laugh and his self-proclaimed greatness. Brash, big-headed, busybody. I think it said, "Begone? May you be cursed until the end of your days. Herlock Sholmes." I knew it. Mr. Sholmes? Herlock Sholmes. Well, I didn't expect to hear that name from this man's lips, that's for sure. As the morning after that nightmare had unfolded on the pavement before me, I was gnawing on a sliver of hard cheese when some men suddenly burst in through the door. They started shouting at me, "This is the police, put the weapon down." Yes, it was a thin sliver, and yes, it was hard, but I wasn't eating the weapon. Disgusting dietary discrimination devils. You clearly had a trying morning yesterday. And there he was in the middle of all the policemen, grinning like a Cheshire cat. That Herlock Sholmes. It's actually just Herlock Sholmes. He's English. I've since found out he's a famous name in detection here in London. Yes, the great detective is really very well known. And his overly sharp mind managed to deduce my whereabouts, apparently. He thinks I'm the knife-wielding madman, me, this weak, stooped kitten of a man? I wonder what great deduction process led him to his conclusion this time. You mean to say that Mr. Sholmes' deduction was the only reason the police arrested you? That would be really most unreasonable. Well, the thing is, I was thrown into a panic when they barged their way in. Of course you were, that's only natural. I was terrified and trembling, and they kept throwing question after question at me in impossible English. Fiendish, foreign, flim-flammery. Well, we are in England, you can't really blame them for questioning you in English. Good point, but my mind went blank. I knew I had to answer, but I didn't know what to say. So I just kept repeating things like, "Yes, I do," and "I'm fine." The next thing I knew, I was in manacles, and before I knew it, I was thrown in here. Oh dear, I'm afraid that's hardly surprising. I'm fine, he's not fine now. Mr. Naruhodo Esquire. Oh, you can just call me Naruhodo. And when we're speaking English, a simple Mr. is more than enough. Oh yes, alright, yes, they've really got to me. This country is poisoning my mind. But please, I beg you to defend me in court tomorrow. You can tell them what really happened. You'll do it, won't you? Well, why? Why is it so hard to say yes to me? Well, the thing is, I'm just a student like yourself on a study tour. A student? I have defended a case in the Old Bailey, only the one though. But at this moment in time, I really don't know what I'm supposed to believe in. I'm confused about what justice in this country even means. Oh, Naruhodo-san. I'm not even the foreign student who was supposed to be here. I'm a sort of locum lawyer, I suppose. But that armband, that's the mark of a defense lawyer from our great empire. It's a keepsake from the man who should have been here. He was my best friend. A keepsake? I know exactly what they're saying about me. Oh, who do you mean? The lawyers, all the British defense lawyers, they won't defend me. Goodness, why do you say that? For the same reasons as you noted before when it happened. There's only the victim and myself around, and I ran away from the scene of the crime. I'm not a fool. I know it looks as though I must be the culprit. It must be very hard for you, Soseki-san. And anyway, I'm a student from overseas. I'm just a foreign nobody to them. Someone not to be trusted. I heard them openly laughing about me before, in my earshot, without any compunction at all. Any trial for this man would be a waste of time, they said, and of course the foreigner did it. They even had the gall to say the man doesn't understand half of what's being said anyway. That's awful. They're wrong. I've studied more English than half of the policemen out there on the streets. I've traveled halfway around the world to learn about these people's country and its great history. But no one here wants to listen to a man with a strange accent. They all hate me. So at the very least, I'd like to entrust my fate to someone who can listen to me in my native tongue. You could do it, couldn't you? When I look into your eyes, I can see it. I can see what you've been through. Soseki-san, it's just that... Give me a little time, please. I'll do what I can for the time being. What do you mean? We shall investigate the case as thoroughly as possible. If we can find some clues, it will give us a much better chance, I'm sure. Oh, yes, thank you. I'll be here, all alone, waiting for you, locum student Mr. Naruhodo Esquire. We should be going then, Naruhodo-san. We have a case to prepare for. So now we should go back to Briar Road. What's the Japanese delegation doing here? Oh, Inspector Gregson. This isn't on the tourist trail, as I'm fairly sure you're well aware. Yes, of course, we're here to investigate. So you've been to the holding cells then. What do you make of the criminal? He's not a criminal, as you put it, Inspector. He's a suspect. We'll see about that. Your Japanese like to stick together, I suppose. Well, do what you will. It doesn't bother me. The bloke's in court tomorrow, whatever happens, and the verdict's a foregone conclusion. The stone-cold air of rejection. Take heart, London this time of year is full of stone-cold air. That makes it worse somehow. Okay, we've already examined all of this. So let's just go ahead and converse. Scotland Yard. Tell me about Scotland Yard, Inspector. Ever since I read about it in The Adventures of Sherlock Sholmes, I've been fascinated by the place. The Yard is the most sophisticated policing organization you'll find anywhere in the world, ma'am. Oh, and you know, I've always dreamt of wearing a real Bobby's helmet. It does make them look the part, seeing that policeman there with his helmet on. You certainly get the sense that this is a man who will take no nonsense in his duty of protecting the city. Oh yes, doesn't he look wonderful? Being a London Bobby is hard going, I can tell you. Oh really? First thing in the morning, you know what he does? Goes around and rouses all the laborers on his beat so they can get off to work. What? He wakes people up? Yep. Raps on their windows with a long pole. Did it myself going back a bit. I had no idea. The Bobby works for the people of the town. It's just another one of his duties. After that, he starts tirelessly patrolling the street all day long. He has to cover 20 miles a day. That's the regulation distance. Can't really imagine how far that is, but it sounds like a long way. Let's see. Let me see. 20 miles? That's approximately the distance from Tokyo to Yokohama. On foot? That's definitely taking things a step too far. And when it gets dark, of course, he has the important job of lighting all the gas street lamps. Oh my. And I suppose in between all those duties, Bobbies are expected to investigate cases as well. And chase after criminals trying to evade the law. I'm not sure you could call it in between exactly, more alongside, but yes. They're expected to handle those jobs as well. We do have men keeling over from time to time, I admit. So I think the reason that, like, or I guess bailiffs are different from, like, street cops, probably. But I was gonna say, like, the reason that the bailiff was so distracted is he has apparently walked in almost a marathon and has been up since before most other people wake up. I always dreamt of wearing one of those helmets, as I said, but it's with a heavy heart that I shall have to relinquish that dream to you, Mr. Naruhodo. Your heavy heart will be my heavy head if you do. About the case. Happened at around 5 in the evening 2 days ago, just there on that open bit of pavement. The victim, a young woman, was stabbed with a blade from behind. Is it right that the lady is still unconscious now? You mentioned that she's been treated in hospital. I never said she was a lady. Truth is, unless she comes around pretty smartish, we won't be able to find out about her at all. I suppose that means they haven't been able to take a statement from her, of course. Here's a map of the local area I happen to have on me. You can take it if you want. Really? Are you sure? It's yard policy to give lawyers, defendant suspects the odd bit of information to go on. I haven't actually accepted the job yet, but still. Thank you, Inspector. We gratefully expect. The local map has been entered into the court record. Anyway, as far as we know, there was no one else on the scene other than the victim and your fellow countrymen. So who did it, do you think? Not much of a head scratcher, is it? Well, I know Mr. Natsume is also claiming not to have seen anyone else around, but just because he didn't see anyone, it doesn't mean we can be sure that nobody else was present. Sorry to have to tell you, but we most certainly can be sure. How? Because, ma'am, the precise moment of the stabbing didn't go unnoticed. Yeah, what? We have 2 very reliable witnesses, no less. It was a typical foggy London day, and your client obviously didn't see them. There were witnesses now? Let's ask about those witnesses. Who are these witnesses, Inspector? A fellow and his wife. And the man's one of the most reliable and respected citizens in all of London. He's a copper from Scotland Yard. Ah. A policeman? That might change things. And this policeman just happened to be there at the exact moment the woman was attacked. Nothing peculiar about that, ma'am. Part and parcel of being a bobby. Catching them banging the act and all that. Do you think it might be possible for us to ask that policeman a few questions? Be my guest, you can ask him what you like in court tomorrow. Oh. I have no doubt he'll be summoned as a witness. So that'll give you something to look forward to. That's that then. He's got no intention of letting us meet the man beforehand, it seems. A policeman witnessed the incident. If you're judicial assistant, I must warn you that this could make our job very difficult indeed. Yes, as a non-judicial assistant, I could have warned me of that too. Oh yes, one more thing, Inspector. The person who led you to the suspect, I hear that was Mr. Herlock Sholmes. What are you bringing him up for? Was it something I said? The color is drained from his cheeks. Let's ask about tomorrow's trial first. That twitchy Japanese bloke goes on trial tomorrow. Are you defending him or not? Well, makes no difference to me, but I will just say this. No London lawyer worth his salt would touch that case with a barge pole. Because the prosecution is being handled by the Reaper of the Bailey, you mean? There's no way to save the man now, it's a waste of time trying. It is all a bit strange, though. Sorry? The Reaper, he hasn't appeared in court once for a good few years now. Yes, we did hear something to that effect. And the only people he usually bothers with are the real scum. The master criminals, the violent ones. Master criminals? The violent ones? That's right. He handpicks his victims, only deals with those guaranteed to go to the gallows for their sins. But Mr. Natsume wouldn't hang for what he's accused of, surely. It's just my point, Sunshine. Yes, the young woman was stabbed, but it didn't kill her, couldn't even say the intent was there. So this isn't the sort of case I'd be expecting the Reaper to want to sink his teeth into, for want of a better phrase. That's not exactly a minor infraction, is it? No, there's got to be more to it, some reason he's taken an interest. Really? What sort of reason, Inspector? You think I can tell what's going on inside the head of that Lord of Darkness? You'll have to ask him yourself at tomorrow's trial. Are we really going to have to face the Reaper again? The Lord of Darkness, as he put it? Okay, Mr. Sholmes. Who did you hear that name from? Oh, well, it was Mr. Natsume who mentioned it. He said that Mr. Sholmes was with the police when they entered his lodgings. I'm sure it was the result of one of Mr. Sholmes' inspirational great deductions. Fiddle faddle. Ah, the man's an amateur, and I'm getting sick and tired of him showing his mug everywhere. Oh. I don't know where he gets his information from, but he turns up at the scene of the crime, wanders around spouting incomprehensible rubbish, and before you know it, he claims to have solved the case. Yes, he's quite astounding, isn't he? He is a great help to Scotland Yard, though, isn't he? Gibble gabble. Ah. Ever seen this before? Oh yes, that's Ranced Magazine. The wonderful publication in which the adventures of Herlock Sholmes appears. Yes, well, that wonderful publication, as you put it, sees fit to include several of the Yard's detectives in its stories. And the so-called great detective makes a mockery of all of us. If you ask anyone at the Yard, it's a misadventure to be included in any Herlock Sholmes tale at all. Well, I suppose there is an element to that. We work our socks off, every one of us, only to be frumped by the public thanks to the obnoxious detective. The man's as dangerous to us at Scotland Yard as he is to all our criminals. That can't really be true, can it, Inspector? Clearly the great detective and the police have a complex relationship. Well, I don't think we're going to get any more useful information out of the detective. Mr. Naruhodo, can I make a suggestion? Oh yes, what is it? Well, it seems to me we must speak with him about this. By him, do you mean Mr. Sholmes? Yes, Mr. Herlock Sholmes, exactly. Look at those shining eyes. You can't wait, can you? Well, Mr. Natsume did blame Mr. Sholmes for all of this, didn't he? Yes, he did. He really did. Which makes him an involved party in the case. Are you just going to ignore that? I hope not. I assure you, it's not simply my selfish desire to meet with Mr. Sholmes again. The trouble is, we have no idea of the man's address even. It's Baker Street. How do you know that? It's in the stories, of course. 221B Baker Street, the most famous address in the world. Oh, I see. Well, there's nothing to stop us from going, I suppose. We better try to find our way there before Susada-san gets any more excited and unpredictable. Hurrah, I'll summon a carriage. We're to have a reunion already with the great detective, Mr. Herlock Sholmes. Before we do that, I do want to at least check out this local map. So this is where the murder happened. Between Meerschaum Street, this unnamed road, and Calabash Road. A new location has been added. Let's go to Sholmes's suite.
Thank you very much. It's just up there overlooking the street. Good day. Thanks again. This is it. The residence of Mr. Herlock Sholmes.
Alright, 1 second, y'all. If I stand perfectly still, maybe the stream will catch back up with me. Okay, I think we're good. So this is where the great detective makes his living. Feels surreal to be here somehow. Is it as described in the stories, Miss Susato? Susato-san. Many famous cases have been solved here in this very room. Oh, I suppose they must have been, yes. I've never read the stories, so it's hard to get quite as excited about it as she seems to be. The detective chases the villain relentlessly as he disappears into the fog down an unlit London street. Oh, the thrill of it, the romanticism. Can't you feel your heart thumping in your chest? Can't you, Mr. Naruhodo? Oh, I suppose I can, yes. So if you don't mind, I'll just stand here and soak up the atmosphere for a while longer. Please don't mind me. Ah, she's obsessed. Well, looks like our detective friend isn't home at present. Excuse me, is anybody home? Oh, do we have a visitor? Hello, is it a big new case for Mr. Sholmes? Hello. Wait, aren't you... Oh, how rude of me. I'll go and make some tea at once. I'm sure it's the same girl. Miss Susato, did you just see the girl who was just here? Oh yes, isn't it truly extraordinary? To think that the King of Bohemia came to this very room to ask Mr. Sholmes to take on his case. The King of Bowaria? King Wilhelm Gottsreich Sigismund von Ormstein, of course. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank. Forget the adventures of Herlock Sholmes for a moment and look over there. The tea's brewed and I have a freshly baked cake as well. Ah, it's you! I knew it. Susato-san recognizes her too. Ah, there you are. And taking that with you as well. I was looking forward to the trial run of my experimental smoke grenade launcher. Oh, good day to you. I'm, well, the inventor, I suppose, of that machine. It's the girl who turned up at the end of Mr. McGilda's trial in the defendant's antechamber. You've never met a lawyer from the Far East before, poor you, having to get straight to work when you've only just arrived in London. Oh yes, it was challenging. Well, try this tea, it's my special blend, you know? Oh, thank you. Is tea supposed to look that color? Oh my, what a fragrant yet mellow flavor. Hooray, it's a winner! I tried blending different leaves designed to alleviate fatigue, you see. You must be exhausted after your long voyage here, and you have another ticklish trial tomorrow. Oh, and you're to defend a Japanese man. I do wish you lots and lots of luck. Did Mr. Sholmes tell you about us by any chance? Oh, you know Hurley, do you? Hurley? Mr. Sholmes to you, surely? Mr. Sholmes was a fellow passenger on the boat that brought us to Great Britain, you see. Was he really? Well, I had no idea. I'm afraid Hurley's out on an errand again today, even though he's just returned from overseas. Wait a minute. We met this girl for the first time ever yesterday after the trial, and only briefly at that. How on earth does she know so much about us? Did she deduce all those things, do you think? And perhaps more to the point, why is she here in Mr. Sholmes' suite? Oh, silly me, I haven't introduced myself, have I? It's a great pleasure to meet you both. My name is Iris Wilson. Is she like John Watson, but like Joan Watson kind of thing? I live here together with Hurley. Ah, Iris, is it? What a lovely name. What? What's the matter? No, wait, this can't be. Did you say that your name is Wilson? What's the matter with Susato-san? Why is she so flustered all of a sudden? Yes, that's right, and what are your names? Oh, I'm Ryunosuke Naruhodo, a lawyer from Japan. Oh, sorry. I'm Mr. Naruhodo's judicial assistant, Susato Mikitoba. It's wonderful to meet you. Lovely, Susie and Runo. Got it. Susie? And Runo? There's more to this girl than meets the eye. I have so many questions for her, I don't know where to start. Yes, and so do I. Let's converse. Iris. It was you that we ran into yesterday, wasn't it, at the Old Bailey? Yes, that's right. You were ever so helpful. Thank you so much. Oh no, not at all. I'm so sorry we couldn't have been more welcoming. Though at the time we did have a rather large gun pointed at us. Like this. Ah, thinking back now, you left with Miss Lestrade in tow, didn't you? Oh yes, that awkward witness Gina Lestrade. Oh, Ginny? Yes, she's a professional pickpocket. So we found out. It was very naughty of her to pinch my invention like that. Are you referring to that trial-disrupting gun-like contraption? Exactly, so I followed her, you see, to get it back. Perhaps I should think about fitting a self-destruct mechanism in my inventions. This girl is dangerous. Anyway, I brought Ginny back here after that, so she could apologize to my trusty technician. Sorry, you're a technician? Hurley, of course, silly. Hurley? Yes, Herlock Sholmes. We live here together. I had no idea the great detective had such an interesting young daughter. Daughter? Not likely. What? I wouldn't call him Hurley if he was my father, would I? Well, then what is your relationship with Mr. Sholmes? Well, I expect you found out that lodgings of any kind in London are very expensive. So the solution is to share the cost with a partner, a roommate. Your roommates? And they were roommates. Oh my god, they were roommates. I hope you don't mind me asking, Iris, but how old are you? 10 at last this year. Well, what of your mother and father? Oh no, they're not around. Oh, I see. I wonder what the story is there. Oh yes, there's something I must ask you. Of course, go ahead, Susie. I'm a very great fan of the adventures of Herlock Sholmes and... Oh, you have a copy of Ranced magazine. Yes, I read every issue. It's delivered all the way to Japan on a ship. Oh, this is so exciting. My stories are being read on the other side of the world. My stories? That's right. Hurley is always solving such amazing cases, you see, and he tells me all about them. They really are quite fascinating. It would be such a shame if I was the only one who ever heard them, don't you think? Goodness. Last night he was telling me all about a new case he just solved on a steamship traveling from a faraway land. I was just in the middle of typing up the manuscript for the next issue before you came. So you are the author. Yes, I'll let you in on a secret if you like. I'm going to call this latest adventure The Speckled Band. The Speckled Band? It's certainly very familiar. Of course, I always change one or two details in the story, here and there. This time I had the idea of making a venomous snake be the cause of all the trouble. Oh, that was Mr. Sholmes' first thought as well, actually. Yes, and of course I know that a snake might not be a credible fit for the facts of the case exactly, but... it's a story. Some poetic license is justifiable to make it more thrilling, I think, don't you? So do you mean to say... are the stories about Mr. Sholmes that are published in Ranced magazine all written by me? Yes, on my wonderful and very modern typewriter. But all the stories I have ever read are written by a doctor of medicine? Oh wait, are written by a doctor of medicine, Dr. John H. Wilson. Susano-san's getting more and more worked up. Yes, that's me. I mean, my name really is Wilson. But what about the doctor of medicine part? That's all true too. I am a doctor of medicine. No, at 10 years old? At 10 years old. Oh, that's quite incredible. But, Dr. Wilson is an English gentleman. Ah, yes. I did alter the setting slightly for the stories to be more compelling. Well, it sounds a little strange, doesn't it? A great detective with a 10-year-old girl in tow. I suppose it does, yes. Poor Susato-san, she looks like her whole world has just fallen apart. Your deductions just now. About before. Yes, what's on your mind, Bruno? Do tell me. How did you know that I was a lawyer and we just arrived in London, I mean? Yeah. Oh, and that we have a difficult trial tomorrow. How did you know all that? Oh, that's what you mean. Please tell us how you did it. Explain every detail. Of course, I'd be delighted, although there's really no mystery. Now let's begin. Iris Wilson is proud to present her Logic and Reasoning Spectacular. Oh, are we going to get to do one of these? First of all, I knew already that you were a lawyer, Runo. After all, I met you yesterday at the Old Bailey in the defendant's antechamber. But you also said that we'd only just arrived in London. How did you know that? I observed a passport and travel ticket protruding from your breast pocket. Oh, I was reasonably confident that you must have only just arrived in the country. And on top of that, you accepted a case against that particular prosecutor, telling me you were unaware of London's court affairs. The Reaper of the Bailey, I walked right into that one, didn't I? Then I noticed a red ink stamp on the back of Susie's hand. You were given that when you visited the local prison to meet with a suspect, weren't you, earlier today? Ah. They used those stamps to keep a close eye on comings and goings, you see. I didn't realize. And the red stamp is only used for people visiting foreign inmates. So that told me that even though you had only yesterday concluded the trial of Magnus McGilded, the two of you had already had cause to visit a foreign inmate at a local prison. However, neither of you was wearing a particularly sad expression on your face, so I concluded that this prisoner was unlikely to be a friend or relative. That led me to believe that you must have accepted a new case. I see. But how could you have known that the trial is tomorrow? Well, having barely been home a few hours yesterday, Hurley solved yet another case. It obviously amused him. He told me that he'd caught a Japanese man who was bawling and trembling. A Japanese man? Well, clearly that must have been Mr. Natsume. Now, Runo has that fancy Japanese sword. And I think your outfit is called a kimono, isn't it, Susie? Well, anyway, it was clear to me that you both come from Japan yourselves. So I put two and two together and decided you must be defending the Japanese man Hurley caught. There was only one conclusion those facts could lead me to. You both came here to ask Hurley about the case. There's a note on the mantelpiece that says the man's trial will be tomorrow. Hurley is always stabbing his notes with a knife, you know, he is silly. And that's all there was to it, really. Thank you for listening. I'm Iris Wilson, and that was one of my great deductions. That was like actually deductions that made sense, though. Well, was it a winner? Were my deductions correct? They were spot on. That was amazing, Iris. Truly a great deduction. You even managed the certain something of Mr. Sholmes' delivery. Oh, well, I was just copying Hurley's style for that. This is really very good news. You could tell us all about the case involving the Japanese man. You will, won't you, Iris, please? The case of the Japanese man. So yesterday, Mr. Sholmes apprehended a Japanese man, you were saying? Yes. Hurley had just arrived back in London after his sea voyage, but the police were waiting for him at the railway station to take him directly to the crime scene. The great detective is a popular man, it seems. Apparently a woman was stabbed on a quiet street somewhere in town. There were witnesses who had seen a short, shifty-looking, stooped man running away from the scene. Short, shifty-looking, stooped man. Mr. Natsume beyond any doubt. So Seki-san said that he didn't see anybody else on the street at all, but it seems there were witnesses after all. Hurley used his great deductive powers to determine the man's address. There was a lodging room very nearby. He went directly there with the police, and what did they find? A short, shifty-looking, stooped man shivering in fear. Mr. Sholmes' great deduction certainly hit the mark that time. Of course it did, he's a great detective. Still, that means the incident occurred only 2 days ago. Surely tomorrow is too soon for the trial, isn't it? Definitely. We have no time to investigate properly. Hurley says that London is rife with crime. Oh. Scotland Yard is doing its best, but they can't stay on top of it, apparently. Oh dear, I hadn't realized the situation was so dire. That's why they can't afford to spend too much time investigating cases and trying the criminals in court. Staff and money are both short. Crimes are usually pinned on the first suspicious person. That's terrible. I suppose it's the harsh reality of the workings of the world's greatest justice system. I suppose it is, but in that case, I don't hold out much hope for Soseki-san. Thank you for answering so many of our questions, Iris. This has been very informative. Oh, you're most welcome. I've had so much fun. Do you happen to know where Mr. Sholmes is at the moment? As you guessed, we'd like to ask him some questions about this case as well. Ah, well, I expect Hurley is still investigating the scene. Of the case involving Mr. Natsume, you mean? Yes, Mr. Natsume? Hurley said he was going to the man's lodgings. If you leave now, you'll probably catch him there. Iris, do you know where those lodgings are? Oh, I imagine the police are still investigating the scene of the crime themselves, aren't they? Did you happen to come across a detective by the name of Gregson when you were there? Yeah, we know Inspector Gregson. Ah, goody, in that case. Give Gregsy this from me, would you? If you do that, I'm sure he'll tell you what you want to know. What is this? A 5-shilling piece and a postcard, it seems. It reads, "Tell the gentleman in black whatever he wants to know. I trust that won't be a problem." Gosh, this will make the inspector help us, will it? Well, thank you, Iris. We'll give it a try. Good luck, then. I'm going to return to writing my manuscript, The Speckled Band. And I'll be making more special blends of tea, so come back again soon. We'd be delighted. Thank you so much, Iris. Oof. Well, Mr. Naruhodo, it's back to the scene of the crime. So, somewhat dubious that they would exert any influence over the men of Scotland Yard at all. We headed back to the scene with Iris's curious note and one of the world's heaviest silver coins in hand. To be continued. Yeah, we'll save. It looks as though the police are still here carrying on with their investigation. Perfect, so let's find Inspector Gregson as quickly as possible. Yes, and let's see if he'll take a break from his chips to look at that silver tip Iris gave us for him. Inspector Gregson, do you have a moment? I'm sorry to say I don't. I'm a very busy man. Much too busy to talk to a pair of foreign gadabouts. That's for sure. We have these for you. A present from Miss Iris Wilson. What? For me? From her ladyship? Her ladyship? Give that here at once. Come on, hand it over. That's for me. Don't wait for me to give it to you, will you? What was that coin exactly? It's a silver crown, obviously, but it's a lot more than that. It's, well, it's an appearance fee, that's what it is. An appearance fee? Oh, I see, you mean. That's right, for the adventures of Herlock Sholmes. Your ladyship always offers me a little financial reward for featuring me every time. Yes, yes, of course. I know all about your exploits, Inspector. I read them avidly. Of course, her using my name without my say-so does make me the butt of a lot of unpleasant jokes, but still. I am sorry, Inspector. That must be difficult for you. Never you mind that. So, what do you want to know then, eh? Sorry? Tell the gentleman in black whatever he wants to know. I trust that won't be a problem, it says. Well, obviously it's not a problem. Go on, fire away. What do you want to know? Well, if you wouldn't mind, Inspector, we'd very much like to know the address of Mr. Natsume's lodgings. Ah, the little knife-wielding mustached Japanese fellow. He lives in a right old hovel. It's just over there, look. On the first floor of that house, on the corner where that wreck of a bicycle's propped up. That is nearby indeed. I remember rightly, the landlord is a Mr. John Garrideb. Right, well, if you see her again, you make sure you give her ladyship my regard, you hear? I mean it, you tell her that Gregson sends his very best wishes. Don't worry, Inspector, we will. Goodbye for now, then, and long live her ladyship. Well, at least he told us what we wanted to know before he left. Yes, so then shall we go and see what we can find in Mr. Natsume's lodgings? Definitely. I assume we need to move? Yeah. Interesting. May I help you? Ah, yes, would this be the residence of Mr. John Garadeb? Indeed it would, sir, and who may I say is calling? My name is Ryunosuke Naruhodo. Mr. Naruhodo is representing Mr. Soseki Natsume. I believe he takes lodging here. We'd very much like to ask him some questions about our client. One moment, please. I shall convey the message to Mr. Garadeb. Did you see that, Miss Susato? That was a real-life English maid. I know. As I understand it, anyone of standing in English society employs a number of household staff. But that was the first time I've seen one in the flesh. Oh, this day keeps getting better. It certainly feels like we've really arrived now, doesn't it? We need only to meet a butler and the experience will be complete. Well, I'm not sure if I'd go that far, but I understand the sentiment. Thank you for waiting. Mr. Garadeb will see you now this way. Good day to you. John Garadeb at your service. Pleased to meet you, sir. This is Ryunosuke Naruhodo. He's a defense lawyer. Do excuse me not getting up. Took a shot to the knee a few years back in the Battle of Maiwand, don't you know. Earned a medal for my pains, but had to withdraw from service. Handed over the reins to the up-and-comings. So he's a retired soldier. It's a hell of a job getting up and down stairs now, I can tell you. Don't get out much, as you can imagine. Yes, it's quite a climb up here to the second floor, isn't it? I was panting at the top of the stairs. You really must take more exercise, Mr. Naruhodo. Do you think so? Well, Mr. Garadeb, no doubt you were very courageous to earn yourself a medal. Oh, it was nothing. The medal's just a folderol, really. Wouldn't like to offend the general, though, so I grudgingly displayed it on the wall. Why don't you fetch it down, Joe, and let these good people see it properly? Joan, fetch the... Ah! Dash it all, woman, be careful. Oh, dearie me, I do beg your pardon, sir. You jolly well nearly took the skin off my hands. I shall be more careful, sir. So anyway, there you have it, living the quiet life now. Yes, I see. Now then, I hear you wanted to know about the chap lodging downstairs, is that right? Yes, we would be very grateful if you could answer some questions for us. Only too pleased, naturally, especially if it helps keep the peace here in Blighty. We've forged an alliance with the Empire of Japan recently, as I'm sure you're aware. And this case is very much in the public eye, as it were. Oh, is it? Even had some famous detective poking around, you know, in this old house, would you believe? Yes, Mr. Herlock Sholmes. Could have been. Didn't catch the chap's name. Not really my cup of tea, all that detective business. Oh, but you have a copy of Ranced magazine here, so... Eh? Ah, no, Anyway, the chap's investigating that foreigner's room as we speak. So he's in Soseki-san's room. It's a bally nuisance is what it is. The whole neighborhood's twitching at its curtains now. I don't like all this fuss. It's jolly unsettling. About Mr. Natsume. About Mr. Natsume then, Mr. Garadeb, please do tell us. Ah, yes, the Japanese chap. Only been lodging here for a week. Oh, just 1 week? So he moved in very recently then. I have 2 lodgers most of the time, one on the ground floor and one just below us. The first floor room became available a week ago and something. Ah, dash it all, Joan, do be careful. Oh my goodness, I'm terribly sorry, sir. If you want to know my opinion, I thought he was a shady sort from the moment I set eyes on him. Oh, why? He seemed to have a most nervous disposition, always shaking and looking over his shoulder. The man had shady written across his sweat-soaked brow, if you ask me. I said to myself, Joan, that man is trouble. Sooner or later he's going to do something untoward. I'm rarely wrong about anything. We won't be calling this maid as a witness, that's for sure. Was there anything else that struck you as suspicious about the man at all? Yes, oh yes, indeed there was. And she's dying to tell us. Had you noticed anything else at all about your lodger, Mr. Natsume? Oh my word, yes, the man was shadier than an orchard. Could you elaborate? Well, take the man's room, absolutely stuffed full of books it is, more than anyone could ever read. And he never so much as passes the time of day with another living soul. I haven't seen a single visitor call. He just trots off to that old bookshop every single day and comes back at 5 to light the gas fire. And the funny little man is up long past the time everyone else in the house has gone to bed too. Oh, I see. The gentleman on the ground floor goes to bed at around 9 each night. I've never known that Japanese fellow to retire any earlier than 2 in the morning. Ah. Could you clarify something, I wonder? What, pray? How do you know so much about Mr. Natsume's routine? Oh. I had understood that neither of the lodgers live on this floor of the house, is that correct? That's right, yes, they're both below us, on the first floor and street level. Then, how is it that you know so much about the lives of your lodgers? The precise times that they come back in the evening, for example, even the times that they go to bed. Ugh! Good grief, Joan, be more careful, woman. Oh my goodness, sir, I'm terribly sorry, sir. Something doesn't add up here. It seems the incident took place around 5 in the evening. Did you happen to look out the window at around that time? The window? Yes, we noticed that the window over there looks out over Briar Road. The incident took place on the pavement, just on the far side of the street. Is there anyone suspicious loitering nearby? Ooh. 5 o'clock is dinner time in the Garrethead household. So I'm afraid I don't remember seeing anything. How about you, Joan? No, sir, it would have been dusk outside already at that hour. And with the fog as well, I should think it would have been quite impossible to see the other side of the road. Oh, I see. Did you notice anything else out of the ordinary, then? Such as? Anything at all, even if it seems unrelated. Well... Yes, was there something then? Well, it's nothing particularly important, but around that sort of time there. For the love of God, Joan, watch what you're doing. Oh, dearie me, what have I done? I'm awfully sorry, sir. Do be more careful. Of course, sir. If I may, Mr. Narrow Hollow. Oh, yes? I have an exceedingly good memory, and as far as I remember, nothing of any significance took place here at that hour, nothing at all. Oh, really? Mr. Garrethead? The way you were talking before, it sounded rather like there might have been. Oh, well, as I was saying, it was just a trifling matter, really nothing of... Ah... Joan, dash it all, what is the matter with you, woman? Begging your pardon, sir. Nothing happened. Yes, quite. Nothing happened. We sat down to a quiet, uneventful meal. Joan? That's right, Mr. Garridev. What is the matter with these two? Sounds like something happened here in this room on the evening of the incident, but what? I wish I knew. Let's also ask about Mr. Natsume's room. Could you tell us which floor Mr. Natsume's room is on? Why, certainly just below us on the first floor. And Mr. Sholmes is investigating there even as we speak? Yes. Told me that's his name and asked him to look into the matter, so I gave him the key. Mr. Natsume has engaged Mr. Sholmes' services? That's a blatant lie. Would it be alright if we also had a look around in Mr. Natsume's room? Don't see why not. It's just down one flight of stairs. Who knows if we'll find anything that could help us with the case, but we have to try. We need all the clues we can lay our hands on, shall we? Yes, and while we're there, we can speak with Mr. Sholmes again. Perhaps he'll be able to tell us more. I guess I'll go ahead and click through these just to see. So that screen seems important. It's a full-sized cannon. What's it doing here? It's real. I thought it might have been a replica. That old thing? Bah, that's little more than a toy. Sorry, the army was selling it off when I retired, so I decided to give it a new home. Never know when the enemy might attack next. Jolly useful to have a cannon about the house. Really? It isn't overkill? Be prepared, I always say. You never know what this twisted world is going to throw at you next, boy. Think there may be trouble brewing, Mr. Garridev? Always is. Take Joan here. Never fails to have a clean apron in reserve. Dries them over the barrel, you see. They dry very well on the cannon there, Joan tells me, which rather proves my point, I feel. It's been reduced to a drying rack. No wonder the huge cannon looks like it's hanging its head in shame. Honestly, it kind of seems like there's nothing we can see just yet. So let's check out Mr. Natsume's room. Oh, there's a cat here. What? Just look at this place and smell it. It's so musty in here. I suppose it's the mountain of old books that are responsible for that. I don't think I've ever seen so many books in all my life. No, me neither. It's so dark in here, too. Is that the window over there? Well, it was the window, I think, yes, once upon a time. But for some reason, it's been closed up with bricks and mortar. So this is where Mr. Natsume lives. By the way, I haven't spotted Mr. Sholmes anywhere, have you? No, that's true, but according to what Mr. Garridev told us, the great detective should be around here somewhere investigating. Now let's just, like, examine stuff until we see him. Aww. Oh my, what an adorable little cat. Perhaps he's looking after all the books while his master is away. I don't know about that. He disappeared into that pile of books as quick as the flash. It was a tricolor Mike, wasn't it? Do they even have that sort of cat here in Great Britain? Perhaps Mr. Natsume brought the little creature with him from Japan. It's made me feel homesick now. Already? We've only been in the country for 2 days. That desk seems to be wedged into a crevasse between the mountain of books on either side. I suppose Mr. Natsume would sit there and read while stroking his cat. Surrounded by all sides by these towering old tomes, surely he dreamt of books every night as well. Yes, he must have done, mustn't he? Oh, what's this? It's a receipt from a second-hand bookshop. Your books. Oh yes, Mr. Natsume's name is on it. Look, and the date of purchase, 2 days ago at 4:45. That's the day of the incident. That's just a short while before he was embroiled in the terrible attack. He must have been on his way back from buying some old books. Oh look, it's a beckoning cat from home. It's a bit big and bulky, isn't it? Surely Mr. Natsume didn't bring that Maneki Neko all the way from Japan with him. I hardly think you're in a position to comment, Mr. Naruhodo. Are you forgetting the enormous Daruma doll that you brought in your luggage? Well, it can be dangerous traveling abroad. I wanted a lucky charm. Well, I imagine Mr. Natsume wanted the same, and this cat is sure to beckon good luck to him. It's not doing a very good job so far, is it? You mustn't say such things. I didn't say a word. Why are my eyes such a giveaway? Why indeed? Look at all those books stacked up there. They almost reach the ceiling. They're all works of English literature, and they all smell so musty. With this volume of books to hand, you'd never be short of reading material, would you? No, what a dreamy idea. Bad dream, maybe, for me at least. Mind you, I don't imagine that the books at the bottom of the pile now will ever be read again. Ah, so reading it is an experience that comes but once in a lifetime, just as the tea ceremony teaches us. Certainly didn't expect the conversation to turn down the path of tea ceremony philosophy. What's up with the window? Could you even call this a window? I think so. It was a window at one time, after all. Although all that remains is a frame around some bricks now. So really, it's just a wall then, isn't it? But why would anyone deliberately brick it up like that? I'm afraid I have no idea. Ah, perhaps Mr. Natsume painted the brick design on in a fit of whimsy. That's alarmingly feasible anyway, whatever the reason. The lack of ventilation in here makes the place feel very oppressive. It does, I imagine being cooped up in a room like this would be extremely tiring. Okay. I don't think there's anything else to see on this side. Oh, hey, it's Herlock. Ah, look, Mr. Naruhodo. Aha, there he is. Where did he appear from? He seems to be engrossed in the pages of an old book. I hope he won't mind if we disturb him. Hello, Mr. Sholmes. Ah, you two, good day. Now, let me see, where was it that we met? Oh, Mr. Sholmes, we were together on the SS Burya. Yes, of course, the Burya. And let me see, what happened on that voyage? It was Kazuma Asogi. He died tragically, but you were a great help to us. Ah, yes, but of course, the case of Mr. Asogi. It was the one with the snake, wasn't it? Oh, well, you seem to remember something of it at least. What an honor to be remembered vaguely by the great Herlock Sholmes. This is Mr. Oh, no, my dear madam, hold your tongue. I pride myself on my superior powers of recollection. Your names are safely recorded in my brain attic. Miss Naruhodo and Mr. Susato. Try the other way around, Mr. Sholmes. Ha 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 ha! I lose the first round. In truth, I had hoped to invite you both to my Baker Street suite the day we arrived in London, but some Scotland Yarders ambushed me at the railway station and whisked me away to a crime scene. It was an entirely trivial case, of course. I solved the matter in no more than 30 minutes. They apprehended Soseki-san in that short an amount of time? I'm afraid the pursuance of a new case has dulled my recollection of my past involvements a little. It is a mistake to think that one's brain attic has elastic walls and can distend to any extent. I do my best to forget useless facts lest they should elbow out the useful ones. Yes, those are my own words of inimitable wisdom, you know, from an adventure entitled A Study in Scarlet. Please, there's no need to quote yourself. You don't always remember my pearls of wisdom, but fortunately my associate pens them beautifully. Zyrus, I suppose. Mr. Sholmes, we have some extremely important questions to ask you about the trivial case you just mentioned. Goodness, what an earnest expression. My dear madame, I should be only too pleased. And this murky room is an apt place to discuss the murky case. Well, let's converse. Mr. Natsume's arrest. We know this to be the lodgings of a Japanese foreign student by the name of Soseki Natsume. It seems that you assisted in his arrest, Mr. Sholmes, for the stabbing of a young woman outside here on Briar Road. Natsume, yes, I believe it was a name rather along those lines. But Mr. Natsume denies it. Was it really justifiable to arrest him on so little? I'm sorry, Miss Susato. I have not the slightest idea what you mean. What? Can't believe he was so looking... He was looking Susato-san squarely in the eye while feigning ignorance. I assure you I am not merely feigning ignorance. It would appear as if the pair of you are under some misapprehension. Oh, how? I assure you I have no recollection of accusing your stooped compatriot of the crime. But that doesn't make sense. The good detective of Scotland Yard made the following request of me, and I quote verbatim. We need you to ascertain the identity and whereabouts of a man seen fleeing the crime scene. Ah, a man seen fleeing. There was a number of books scattered on the pavement at the scene. From the book plates I was quickly able to determine the bookshop from which they had been purchased. On speaking with the proprietor, I was immediately led to this address. Elementary, wouldn't you say? I believe there is a receipt around here somewhere from the establishment in question. So you don't think Mr. Natsume is the culprit, then? That I could not tell you, but it was aggravating my faculties, hence why I returned here. However, this place is such a trove of fascinating books, I found myself quite lost in bibliophily. Do not be deceived into believing that I am a man of leisure. No, no, no. Oh dear. Ah, tell me. You encountered the landlord of these lodgings? Yes, Mr. Garadeb, a retired military man. It's the first time I've met a soldier from the great British institution that is the services. And it was the first time I've ever met a maid from the great British institution that is service. Ha 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 ha! I didn't think it was that funny. I do apologize. As you may well be aware, many households in London employ a maid. Yes, I read as much in my Great Britain primer. But so conversely, whether or not a household employs a maid has come to betoken the social standing of those dwelling therein. Betoken their social standing? Sorry? Put simply, my dear fellow, those who employ at least a single maid are considered middle class. Those who do not are beneath that. In the upper echelons of society, of course, households employ enough staff to constitute a large family. Goodness, how extraordinary. As you can appreciate, for those on the precarious boundary between the middle and lower classes, being able to afford just one maid is of the first importance. I had no idea. And it is for precisely that reason that I find great stimulation in the situation upstairs, specifically in that retired Army veteran, Mr. John Garadeb. Oh? Affable as he is, the fellow is hiding something. Whether or not it imposes on the circumstances of this case, I am yet unable to ascertain. I'm thoroughly lost on what he means to say. The dingy room. This room is thoroughly suffocating for the soul, my dear fellow. I assure you, any man whose lot is to dwell in a place such as this will stab somebody sooner or later. Mr. Natsume has stabbed no one. But sooner or later, as I said. I don't believe that's the issue here. About this dark little room, Mr. Sholmes. Why is there no longer a window? Do you have any idea? No window? Well, I mean, I can clearly see that there is a window of sorts. But it's been completely blocked with bricks. Ah, I see. The answer to that question is quite simple. Window tax. Window tax? What is that? Surely not a tax on windows. Precisely that. Oh my goodness. Until relatively recently, tax was levied on households in this country by the number of their windows. Those of lesser means, having inherited a sizable and costly family home perhaps, rapidly closed windows up. While the rich opened windows here, there, and everywhere, in an effort to curry favor with those in power by furnishing them with large sums of tax money. How awful and unjust, forcing people to live in rooms devoid of light. Indeed, disease was rife as a result, so some 40 years ago or thereabouts the window tax was abolished. But its legacy remains, as you can see, in squalid lodgings such as these, for example. I suppose Mr. Natsume's stipend for living here in London isn't very generous, perhaps. It would appear so. I've done a little digging and discovered that these lodgings were offered at an extraordinarily low price. Because the room is so awful, I should think. Apparently, Mr. Natsume only moved in here about 1 week ago. Yes, that's correct. However, I don't believe the low rent is explained by the shabby nature of the accommodation. Oh? Still, that is of little relevance here, a matter not worthy of further attention. Are you sure? I'm curious now. Well, I believe I've told you all I can now. Thank you, Mr. Sholmes. Ah, yes, Mr. Naruhodo. Was it not your intention to become a practitioner of law? You remembered that, did you? Will you perhaps be offering your service in this very matter, I wonder? To the occupant of this room, Mr. Natsume, was it? I'm not sure. Not sure? On what grounds? Well, I actually defended someone in court here only yesterday. Really? Well, then I congratulate you, sir, on an ambition realized, and so promptly, too. The thing is, it's really made me question things. Am I right to believe in my clients? To trust in their innocence? Yes, trust. Mr. Sholmes, Mr. Natsume didn't do it, did he? Ah ha 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 ha, my dear fellow, I haven't the first idea. Oh, but I thought that's why you were here. Didn't you come back to investigate? Ah, yes, that was indeed my initial intention. But there are simply too many fascinating books here. I couldn't possibly ignore them. Oh, I see. Nevertheless, there are 2 facts that I can state quite unequivocally. The man who fled the scene of the crime 2 days ago was the Japanese occupant of this room, and there are witnesses who swear to having seen the same man commit the crime. That is all I can say. Ah, and one more thing. Oh, what is it, Mr. Sholmes? Tell us. I cannot say with any certainty whether or not it is of relevance to this case, but I am quite sure that the retired army man who owns this property is hiding something. Mr. Garrideb is. Mr. Sholmes said as much. Hold on, I missed what the rest of that was. Mr. Sholmes said as much before, actually, didn't he? Anyway, at present, that is really all that plays on my mind in relation to this case. Mr. Naruhodo, as yet our investigations have uncovered nothing that could help establish Mr. Natsume's innocence. And you're right, perhaps it's time we probed a little deeper into Mr. Garrideb's secret. Just remember, I cannot be sure whether the landlord's secret will prove to be of relevance or not. But I wish you every success, of course, Mr. Naruhodo. A busy man indeed. He's gone back to his book in the corner of the room. Let's go back to the Garrideb's room. Ah, you pair again. Tell me, was the detective chap, I forget his name, still hard at work down there? Mr. Herlock Sholmes? Ah yes, rings of egg bell, all that detective business isn't really my thing, I'm afraid. Well, Mr. Sholmes is in his element down there. Jolly good show. Another cup of tea, if you please, Joan? Now then, why don't you tell me what... Ah! For the umpteenth time, woman, will you watch what you're Ballywell doing? I shall be serving dinner shortly, sir. Ah, yes, of course. Rightfully rude of me, but I'm afraid I shall have to ask you to take your leave if you'd be so kind. Oh yes, of course. We are deeply grateful for all your assistance. Not at all, not at all. Don't get much chance to talk with young foreigners like yourselves. It's been a pleasure. Best of luck and all that. Perhaps you could see yourselves out. According to Mr. Sholmes, Mr. Garrideb is hiding something. Since no other avenues of investigation seem open to us at the moment, perhaps we should do some digging. Is that Sholmes in the window? That is Sholmes in the window. Ah. Mr. Sholmes? Aha, we meet again, my dear fellows. Good gracious, when did you sneak in here? Herlock Sholmes, sir, at your service. Whatever were you doing over by the window? I am given to watching the evening sky as the sun sets, madame. Yet sadly, cheerful as the room downstairs undoubtedly is, it lacks an aperture for such observation. So I took the liberty of borrowing a small corner of space by the window up here. Well, keeping an eye to one's windows at dusk is the prudent thing to do in London, I'm gathering. Ah, and one other thing, Mr. Naruhodo. Oh, me? I thought perhaps you might be in need of a certain great detective's great mind. Wait, he's not talking about, is he? I didn't expect to be going through that again so soon. Please let this be what I think it is. Do you mean, Mr. Sholmes? There is a mighty secret in this modest room. My eyes see even the most trivial of trifles. I take it you're prepared, Mr. Naruhodo. I think so. There's just time enough for one of my greatly admired great deductions. Let us conclude this matter before dark. Mr. Garrideb, though it would seem you are a military man of considerably distinguished service, your standing as a landlord is most certainly not what one might call first-rate. I'm afraid, sir, that is all too clear to me. There are two conclusions I have been able to draw by careful observation of your living arrangements. I beg your pardon. The first, that even as we speak, you are concealing the presence of a ferocious beast in your care. And the second is that as a result of the beast's violent rampage, you've lost something very dear to you. Ah, Mr. Naruhodo, look. The old man's broken out in a cold sweat. Unbelievably, it seems Mr. Sholmes' conclusions are both spot on. How could you possibly? How could I possibly know, you mean to inquire? The answer couldn't be simpler, sir. We're in the dense jungle of logic and reasoning. I am the king of beasts. Ah, and I know only too well that wild beasts are not easily tamed. So, shall we begin? Once again, Herlock Sholmes is proud to present his Logic and Reasoning Spectacular. Topic 1. Nature of the Beast. It certainly shouldn't take a great detective to see that a fearsome beast has been on the rampage of late within these four walls. Thus we are faced with the question, what form might this beast take? Ah, for a man with a military breeding, your eyes are uncommonly candid. Aye, your furtive glance, Mr. Garrideb, leads us directly to the answer. The true nature of the beast that has run rampant here is revealed by that lion statue. Probably not. As though an army man, you appear unimposing at best. The fact that it fueled your admiration for the mighty lion, king of beasts. What is this piffle, I ask you? In the end, your admiration became so great, in fact, that you had a living, breathing specimen shipped from India, which you tried to keep in this very house. What? Oh wait, he had like a hand mark on the side of his face. Yet living with such a wild beast proves to be more difficult than you had imagined. These chilling traces of a wild rampage are still very much in evidence. Well, yet as we look around, the beast in question fails to present itself. Where could this angry creature have disappeared to? Madame? Me, I pray you do not consider me unchivalrous, but it is plain to me with one glance in your direction. It is. Your dress pocket gives us a handsome clue as to the beast's current whereabouts. For protruding from it is a handbill advertising a circus show. Ah. Yes, you sought to dispose of this terrifying lion, Mr. Verideb, at Batty's Circus, a traveling show currently sojourning in a nearby park. I have observed the tents. You sold the savage lion, sir, to the circus troupe. I most certainly did not. I believe I have made my point. The fearsome beast which ran amok in this room was an Indian lion, and a simple visit to the circus show now will reveal the lion prancing jubilantly through a ring of fire. A rampaging Asiatic lion. Now, Mr. Garadeb, it is plainly clear that you still have deep feelings for this formidable beast. Indeed, in that blithe pose, the distress this loss has caused you is veritable... No, what did that say? Veritably tangible. Your head weighs heavy on your shoulders, the pain you feel being revealed by that supporting arm. Amid fits of tears, you let your beloved beast go. The strain of losing something so dear to you is clearly visible in your visage. Nonsense, man, I simply... But what we must now ask ourselves is the true cause of this pain. And we need only follow the direction of your gaze to find the answer. It is the piles of bills that has given rise to the pain you suffer. Every envelope contains another demand for payment. For cartloads of meat, potatoes, wheat, and tea. Indeed, feeding your beloved has had a devastating impact on the financial circumstances of your household. So you had no choice but to let it go. Yes, well, Now, in a final fit of rage, the ferocious beast carried out one last unimaginable attack. Unimaginable? The aftermath of which can be clearly seen by observing the carpet over there. Very expensive woolen carpet, if I am not mistaken. Oh, dearie me. What could have caused such a destructive outburst? Ah. This time, madame, I'm afraid it is you who has inadvertently revealed the truth to me. Your wandering eye has settled upon the answer very neatly indeed. Yes, to explain the dire state of the carpet, we need only look at the Tower of Cakes. There's no creature more dangerous on this earth than a beast with an unsatiated appetite. Was it or was it not once said by a certain noblewoman, if they have no bread, let them eat cake? Food is at the heart of all tragedy, in fact. Whatever do you mean? Having tired of the taste of cake, the beast begun to stalk its next prey. I'm sure I need not spell out the nature of this final act of destruction carried out by the beast. There's only one logical conclusion. Worked into a frenzy by hunger, the lion attacked and ate the carpet. The teeth marks in the carpet are a perfect match with those of a lion I once saw in India. Carpet gnawed on by the starving lion. Thus concludes Herlock Sholmes' great deduction of this beastly puzzle. Arg! What is the matter with you, Joan? You're pouring scalding hot tea all over me. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Garadeb. I'm afraid I didn't notice. My deductions can be startlingly sharp. It stands to reason that your cup runneth over. Indeed, my revelations can make people spill tears at times, too. Oh. Mr. Sholmes, sorry to butt in again, but could I make an observation? Why, certainly, Mr. Naruhodo. What is it again? Well, your deductions just now, do you really think a lion could have fit inside a room of this size? Indeed, it is the only explanation for the facts. The terrifying truth all too often lies beyond the realms of common sense. But wouldn't it be an idea to consider what lies inside the realms of common sense as well? But if an uncaged lion had run amok in this very room, surely Mr. Garrett-Evan is may have been hurt or worse. Ah, that's where you are stuck. No doubt the former military man held his own against the beast using that large cannon. But you said they sold the lion to the circus. And what about the food? Meat and potatoes are one thing. But I don't believe I have ever heard of a lion that drinks tea. Ah, my dear Miss Tusato, it occurs to me with some regularity that irrespective of race and breeding, whenever anyone lands on Great British soil, they are infused with a highly appropriate taste for afternoon tea. Oh, what a glorious notion. Well then, Mr. Naruhodo, it's your turn to shine again. I had a feeling this was coming. A slight massage, that's all Mr. Sholmes' deductions need. You can do it. Excellent, I've been waiting for my trusty partner in deduction to step forward. Mr. Naruhodo. I don't know yet whether or not this is going to help with Mr. Natsume's case. Still, uncovering the truth is always worthwhile, whatever the motivation. At least that's what I want to believe. Let us start again from the beginning of Herlock Sholmes' Logic and Reasoning Spectacular. Course correction. Hold it, Mr. Sholmes. Certainly shouldn't take a great detective to see that a fearsome beast has been on the rampage of late within these four walls. Thus we are faced with the question, what form might this beast take? Ah, for a man with a military breeding, your eyes are uncommonly candid. Your furtive glance, Mr. Garrett, leads us directly to the answer. The true nature of the beast that has run rampant here is revealed by the lion statue. I really didn't see the lion thing coming. No, but if you observe Mr. Garrett's reaction, it rather seems as though some beast did indeed run amok here in this room. It is something with a very fierce nature. It couldn't have been a lion transported from India. So what was it then? We must follow Mr. Garrett's gaze. That will lead us to the true answer. It's probably the mortar shells, right? These are shells for the cannon, aren't they? A strange place to keep them. I imagine they have some significance to Mr. Garrett from his time in the army. Of course, he mentioned a battle to us before, didn't he? Do you remember? Said that he'd been shot in the knee. Perhaps it was one of these that hit him? If around that size it hit his knee, there'd be nothing left of it, or Mr. Garrett for that matter. Mr. Sholmes has a Persian slipper, and this man has spent shells. Perhaps it's customary in Britain to display raw rubbish on the mantelpiece. Photograph frame. What's this photograph? It appears to be from Mr. Garrett's wedding. He looks very happy, doesn't he? He does, but you can't make out his bride. No, how unfortunate. Something must have struck the glass directly over the woman's face. I wonder what happened. Probably best not to delve too deeply there. The glass is broken, so you can't see the bride's face at all. No amount of cracks could hide a woman's plump form. I think powerful would be kinder than plump, Mr. Naruhodo. Yeah, she certainly looks like that. There's a lot of horsepower there. Not someone you'd want to upset, that's for sure. Oh look, have you noticed her wedding ring? It's very large, isn't it? Yes, that's an unusual design. Looks like some sort of embellished sunflower.
Take that!
Let's try the newlywed bride in the statement. The true nature of the beast that has run rampant in here is revealed by that newlywed bride. Precisely, Mr. Naruhodo. No other explanation could possibly fit. Yes, this framed print picture pictures your wife, Mr. Garrett. And while we lament the fact that her face is obscured, You can still make out her mighty arms and note the considerable horsepower they must contain. Oh, indeed, surely any woman of such powerful constitution would be honored to be described as a beast. Honored might be stretching a point. Too late. The fact remains that the beast which so clearly savaged this room was your wife, Mr. Garrideb. Yeah! The chilling traces of a wild rampage are still very much in evidence. Well, yet as we look around, the beast in question fails to present itself. What could this angry creature have disappeared to? Madam? Me? I pray you do not consider me unchivalrous, but it's plain to see with one glance in your direction. It is. Your dress pocket gives us a handsome clue to the beast's current whereabouts. The poor, fragile, defenseless woman is beside herself. I don't know about fragile. Oh dear. Anyway, Mr. Sholmes is quite right. There's no sign of a Mrs. Garrideb anywhere. It seems there may be a clue as to her whereabouts. A clue that this maid is trying to hide. I wonder where Mr. Garrideb's wife could be. Oh, the wedding ring. She's wearing a very large ring. Look. Oh yes, a sunflower design with some rather nice embellishments. It's on the ring finger of her left hand, which means it's surely a wedding ring. Looks like it's on there for life too. I can't imagine it would slide off a finger of that size. That's something to think, Mr. Naruhodo, not say. Do you know Mr. Garrideb's wife in the photograph had a ring very much like this one. It was a large sunflower design as well. Really, you have a great memory for these things. A large sunflower wedding ring. Let's go ahead and present that wedding ring. Your wedding ring gives us a handsome clue as to the beast's current whereabouts. Ah! Indeed it does. That flowery band gleaming on your finger gives you away. For it is identical to the one shown on the hand of Mr. Garrideb's bride in this photographic print. In other words, you are no ordinary household maid. No. You are Mr. Garrideb's lucky bride. You are Mrs. Garrideb herself. Oh my word! Well, jolly fine detecting, sir. As you rightly surmised, this is the wife, yes, my Joan. Rather let herself go, you might say, but she was a valley... something arg. It would appear that you don't live in the most comfortable of circumstances, after all. Hey, welcome to the stream, SC Kid. You are a retired army man, yet you are in the business of renting out rooms. I would assume, therefore, you have insufficient means to employ a maid. Would that be correct? It's not right, I tell you. I was 2nd Lieutenant of the 3rd Regiment. A man has his pride, don't you know? By golly, it's a sorry thing when a chap can't even afford to have a single maid in his employ. Yes, here in London one is rather judged. A household cannot be considered worthy of society if it employs no staff at all. Though in my considered opinion, such concerns about appearance are a folly. You mean that Mr. Garrideb has his wife working as his maid? Precisely. Am I right, Mr. Garrideb? Only in company, obviously, but listen here. This must remain a secret. Tip-top secret, please. The raging wife of Mr. Garrideb is the beast. Now, Mr. Garrideb, it's plainly clear that you still have deep feelings for this formidable beast. Indeed, in that blithe pose, the distress this loss has caused you is something tangible. Your head weighs heavy on your shoulders, the pain you feel being revealed by that supporting arm. Mr. Sholmes is quite something. He's still calling Mr. Garredub's wife a beast. Yes, as a woman, that feels rather uncomfortable. But Mrs. Garredub is standing right beside her husband as we speak. In other words, he hasn't lost his beloved at all, has he? Oh, how true. So perhaps that supporting arm that seems to be propping up his head has some other significance then. According to Mr. Sholmes, Mr. Garredub's pain is tangible, though. What could that pose of his really signify? We did see he's, like, hiding... yeah, a slapped cheek. Your head weighs heavy on your shoulders, the pain you feel being revealed by that slapped cheek. And of course, the deliverer of that impressive mark on your cheek that refuses to fade was you, Madame Joan Garredub. Well, yes. You have been desperate to hide that slap mark on your cheek, sir. Ugh. How the blazes? How did you work that out, man? Nothing escapes the notice of one trained in the art of observation, my dear fellow. That's why you haven't looked directly at us even once. To keep your other side from view. Well, Now, let us proceed to the next conundrum. Why were you subjected to such a violent slap? In other words, we must ask ourselves what caused Madame Garredub to fly into a rage. We need only follow the direction of your gaze to find the answer. Yes, it is the pile of bills that has given rise to the pain you suffer. Didn't Mr. Sholmes say that the bills were all for lion fodder? Yes, but now we've established that the lion never existed, which can only mean that the thing responsible for gobbling up all that food is Mr. Garredub's wife. Mr. Naruhodo, she's a person, not a thing. Yes, well, she's also a person who gave her husband a mighty slap around the face. One so hard that it left a perfect hand mark, in fact. Yes, why would a woman want to hit her husband with such force, I wonder? I'd love to know the answer to that question. Ah, someone must be reading this book at the moment. There's a bookmark here, look. Mr. Garredub is clearly an avid reader. Oh, wait a minute. I don't think this is a bookmark. Oh no, so it isn't. It's a note written in a woman's hand. Oh, James, I love you, yours Mary. And look next to the signature here. Lip marks made with lipstick. Oh, what a passionate and romantic gesture. Don't get any ideas, Susanoo-san. Oh dear, I'm sorry. So this book is actually a love note. Bookmark is actually a love note then.
Take that!
Let's present that love note. Yes, it is this love note that has given rise to the pain you suffer. Oh, James, I love you, yours Mary. Passionate indeed. Perhaps the sender of this note, a certain Miss Mary, is the fly in the ointment here. Gah. But I don't know the Bally woman. You don't know her? That note wasn't written to me. It was just in the book. I don't know how it got there. It was just in there, you say? That's right, that's what I've been saying. Ah, a likely story. Now listen here, Joan, old thing. I explained at the time. I bought the book at the second-hand place, and the note must already have been in there. So the previous owner of the book was using the note as a bookmark, you mean? That's right, that's what I've been saying. Ah, a likely story. For heaven's sake, woman, look at the name. It's written to James. My name, in case you'd forgotten, is John. Ah. A likely story. Are you questioning my name now? And there we have it. Arouse the suspicions of the female heart, and you unleash a beast with the most ferocious bite. Now, in a final fit of rage, the ferocious beast carried out one last unimaginable attack. He does scream a lot. Unimaginable. The aftermath of which can be clearly seen observing the carpet over there. Very expensive woolen carpet, if I am not mistaken. Oh dearie me, what could have caused such a destructive outburst? Ah. This time, madame, I'm afraid it is you who has inadvertently revealed the truth to me. Your wandering eye has settled upon the answer very neatly indeed. Yes, to explain the dire state of the carpet, we only need to look at that tower of cakes. I don't buy that. But surely Mrs. Garrideb didn't eat the carpet. No, of course not. But there doesn't seem to be any doubt that the state of disarray that this room is in is a result of her wild temper. No, that's true. So this is the last part of Mr. Sholmes' deduction we need to fix. We need only to follow Mrs. Garrideb's gaze, and that will tell us the real answer. Alright, let's see what we can see. So it's probably the candlestick, right? Because it looks like burnt. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and present the candlestick. Yes, to explain the dire state of the carpet, we need only look at the candlestick. Most illuminating, my dear fellow, and of course the only possible way out of this logical labyrinth. Yes, the remnants of a ferocious attack in which the carpet was devoured are clearly visible. Indeed they are. The scorch marks at the edge clearly give the truth away. Scorch marks? It would appear that this room was the scene of a little marital altercation. Miss Garrideb's mighty arm muscles left an impression not only on her husband's face, but on the entire room. The force of her strike caused a candle to fall from the holder, and in seconds the carpet was alight and the whole corner of the room in flames. Yes, for the most ferocious beast in the world is neither a violent lion nor a vengeful woman, but fire. And in this room, this is just us finding a domestic abuse case, I guess, while we're trying to solve a murder case, or attempted murder case. The person in question is not actually dead. They were just stabbed. And in this room, that ferocious beast bared its claws and ran amok. Eloquently put, my dear fellow, so you see there's but one conclusion here. After the sparks of marital discord flew, this room was the scene of a fire. Mr. Sholmes, sir. I salute you! Carpet scorched by a small fire. Solved. Deduction complete. Elementary. It's these dashed long winter nights, you know, nothing to do but read in front of the fire. Luckily, there's a jolly good secondhand bookshop just around the corner by all my old novels there. And in the pages of one particular novel, you discovered some rather illicit material, for which your wife admonished you harshly, it seems. Don't know about admonished, demolished might be rather close to the mark. And the beast is most certainly an apt to here we go again. And the carpet was that destroyed by a fire when a candle fell on the floor. Afraid to say it was. Happened in the blink of an eye, you know. He's like stirring his tea with his pipe. Is that not gonna get like tobacco in his tea? whole place filled with smoke, couldn't see a bally thing. Was caught between the old stick's rage and the raging flames. You paint a torrid picture, sir. One that would have been most entertaining. Had sympathy for you. Didn't take long for the fire to spread, of course. The bally furniture started going up as well. You had to hide the mess behind the that screen for the time being. Over here, Mr. Garridib. You have nothing to hide now, if you'll allow me. Not all my favorite old novels in that case, but as soon as the fire got hold of them, that was it. Whoosh, up in smoke. Gosh. Then the wife started hurling things at me. What a terrible sight it must have been. There was I, back up against the window, under heavy enemy fire. Incendiary books incoming 10 to the dozen. The worst of it is, I lost my favorite book called The Lion's Pride. The Lion's Pride? Ah yes, your notorious love of big cats coming through again. I assure you the title didn't influence my choice in the slightest. So the poor man really did lose something dear to him as a result of the ferocious beast's rampage. Mr. Sholmes' deductions turned out to be correct once again. It can only be described as a great British wonder. I can tell you it was total carnage, flames everywhere, and the old stick fell full fettle. Out of interest, what time of day was that? I'm not sure I can remember. It was 2 days ago now. Let's see, around 5 o'clock, I think? At the exact same time as a terrifying incident was unfolding outside your window on the street below. Even more terrifying on the inside, I can assure you. The whole of Blighty could have been flattened outside my window at that moment, and I wouldn't have noticed a dashed thing. So what I wonder is, what happened is, in all of that madness, she threw a knife at him, and it killed the person outside the window. Oh, really? Mr. Sholmes? Yes, Mr. Naruhodo, what can I do you for? Well, I think we've gotten to the bottom of Mr. Garridib's situation now, but what does it have to do with Mr. Natsume's circumstances? Can't help you there, I'm afraid. My dear fellow, if you recall, I did say as much from the outset. I warned you that although I knew the retired army man to be hiding something, I could not be sure whether his secret would prove to be of relevance or not. I just knew you were going to say that. Aha! Now, Mr. Naruhodo, you mustn't lose heart. Bear in mind that all things fall into one of only two categories, those relevant to the case and those not. That makes no sense to me. Well, no matter. It is of far greater importance that you make up your mind now. Sorry, visiting hours at the prison will soon be over. Oh no, is it that time already? If we're to accept Mr. Natsume's case, we have official paperwork to attend to. So that's it. No more time to think. Perhaps you'd like to betake yourselves to bidding us farewell now. We must prepare supper for Mr. Garridib. Oh yes, I'm so sorry. Thank you both very much for your time. Soseki-san will be waiting for us, and I'm gonna have to give him an answer. Okay, I know it seems like we're like basically at the end here, but at least the end of this part, but my voice is kind of starting to go, and it's like 10 o'clock. So I think I'm gonna call it a night here. Thanks for stopping by, SC Kid. Always happy to see you here. I'll be back for some more Persona on Wednesday. Have a good night, and I will hopefully see you Wednesday.